So Jeff, thank you so much for joining the Modern CFO Show podcast. I really do appreciate your time and joining today. Just for the viewers, it'd be great if you can kindly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Prodigy and what is it that you guys do.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Zach. Appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk. So I've been CFO of Prodigy just over a year now. What we do, we're a game-based learning company. Our primary product is a math video game, sort of traditional role player game, where you're doing battles, and what the student has to do is answer math questions in order to get power. We also have a village builder game, which teaches sort of the English language curriculum, and we also have some science curriculum and a few others likely on the way. But yeah, we're focused on making sure that kids around the world really can love learning, and we think video games is a great way to bring that about.
100%. I mean, just as you're speaking, I'm already getting jealous because I wish this was around, 15 years ago when I was at school. Because I think everyone's attention spans would have been a lot greater and probably would have enjoyed school a lot more. To be honest with you,
That's where the idea originated. Our co-founders both were sort of very frustrated with, especially one of them, didn't like math as a child in elementary school, and always doing worksheet after worksheet, math problem after math problem, just very boring over and over and over again. But he really loved Pokemon, and so therefore spun up the idea of why can't math be as fun as Pokemon?
well, this is it. I mean, like if you look now, the amount of kids, both guys and girls, that are going home to play Fortnite and all of these great games, if they can introduce that kind of side of it into the school, then you're onto a winner already. Which I'm sure is working dividends for you. You guys are based all around the world as well, or just in Toronto at the moment?
Yeah, so our headquarters are in Toronto. We serve primarily the North American market, so most of our customers are in the US and Canada, but we're in the UK, Ireland, Australia as well. We don't necessarily do a ton of proactive marketing there, but people have organically found us and love using our product. So we will likely be expanding beyond sort of the North American border in the future, but right now, North American market is still a lot more work to go there, and success so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to pick your brains a little bit later in terms of the CFO role and how you kind of manage your day to day and dealing with different operations overseas and whatnot. But just to kind of kick off the podcast, I wanted to ask you in terms of how it works for Prodigy in terms of working from home, because in our previous conversation you said that you're an office optional business, and I know, to be honest, the age old debate of being in the office and working from home isn't kind of going away anytime soon. So I wanted to ask, what does remote work look like for Prodigy? What's the benefits for you and your team that you're seeing
Yeah,
at the moment?
yeah, no, it's a great question, and you know, before COVID, I was in business. We're 100% in person. We actually believed a lot in face to face. I ran a team across the globe. I found myself sort of in Europe quite frequently, visiting my teams there. In Canada, visiting my teams there, and there's a lot of benefits to the in person, 100%. So I think building up relationships is more challenging when you're in a remote environment. Um, but yeah, so Prodigy, I think we've kind of tried to blend the best of both worlds, where we are office optional. So we do have a great location right in downtown Toronto near Union Station, so relatively accessible for people if you're on the train lines there. Uh, I am located in Boston, so I am not going into the office on a daily basis. We have some people who like to go into the office. They like the space, they like the environment there. Um, we do get together as a leadership team once a month up in the Toronto office. So we do get that face-to-face time. I get my full. I sort of lead the finance and data teams at Prodigy. So about once a quarter, we try to get that full team together as well in person, where we do an on-site. And uh, you know, primary focus of that is to build those relationships in person, so you're not just sending a Slack message on a transactional basis. But what I've found uh, incredibly helpful, certainly recruiting talent. I think more and more companies are going back to the office in some form or fashion, and there's some folks that is just not going to work for them for various reasons. They don't live near a major city, and so that becomes more of a burden on themselves and the family. But they do fantastic work, and so you want to give those folks an opportunity. It's not for everybody. You definitely talk to friends of mine who are like, "There's no way I could be productive from a house every day." I also find people, if that's their rhythm, they actually sometimes go off and either work from a coffee shop or go to a WeWork or something else if they need to get out of their home environment. But when they do that, they're typically going still pretty close to their house. So what it does is remove that actual commute. And I'd say in North America, the commutes tend to be a bit longer than in Europe. So even when I had teams in Switzerland at a prior company, oftentimes they were much closer to the office. So maybe they had a 15 to 30-minute commute as opposed to in North America, it's 30 plus for most people. And so that just gives people a lot more back to their day. But I'd say, yeah, the pro is you don't have the commute. The con is you need to work harder at building those relationships. And in a remote world, you can't just pop by somebody's desk or sit in the pod with a few people and just hear what's going on. So you need to be more proactive in your leadership and management style of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. There's always going to be pros and cons for both, and like I said, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. It's obviously what works for you and your staff, and ultimately the business as well. I know from a staff perspective, like I've got a 1 year old, so I can get how spending not maybe a bit more time at home, but being around available after working hours and stuff will always help. But at the same time, I think especially in this day and age, you really can't go wrong with meeting people face to face. You learn so much more about them, especially whether it be one to ones or hiring new talent, like you said. That face to face is kind of valuable. In your experience, just to stay on this point, do you feel no? How important is it to really meet people face to face in 2025? Would you say that the pros outweighs the cons ultimately to get everyone in one room where coming back to the office is probably a bit more beneficial now than say a few years ago?
I'm still in the camp that I think with the right structure, remote work is still the best option. If you have if you have sort of the structured environment to get people together on some kind of cadence, I think it is challenging if you. I have worked with people that I've never met before. Not at Prodigy. I've actually gotten a chance pretty much to meet everybody at this point, but in my previous company, we were also remote, but we didn't do as much of the in-person. We had leadership team getting together, but we didn't have the rest of the organization to get together, which I think is challenging. But I think many people have gotten used to building relationships, even just how you and I are doing right now on a video call, and that works wonders as well. The thing that you need to make time for is the non-transactional conversations, and to be able to set up time with. I try to meet everybody on the team, not just my direct reports, on some kind of regular occurrence every 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum to, just check in, see how things are going. I think it's important to really understand what makes everybody tick, what's working well, what's not, and that's not going to come about through a Slack message. Hey, how's your day going? It's going to be pretty standard. Hey, all is good. But when you actually at least get to see somebody on video, you can talk to them almost as if you were across the table from them.
Yeah, exactly. I think technology is not exactly all it was 10 years ago. You've got your Zooms, Google Meets, everything's HD. It's like you said, sitting across the room from somebody. I think to kind of understand from your point of view, I think really you've hit the nail on the head, and it just comes down to the leadership, right? If the company has the foundations to set up the correct style of remote work, it works wonders. So it's just about you doing the work to put the effort in and making sure that it works for you and the team, basically.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think a lot of companies, obviously everybody during COVID went remote, but they kept most of the in-person structure in place. They didn't pivot to what should be the sort of the norms and processes in a remote world. So our company is very good at documentation. So if you miss a meeting or you weren't able to attend that one, it's not necessarily always recorded, but the notes are always there, and it's really good documentation. There's back and forth that happens, sort of live working sort of Google Sheets or Google Docs. which lets everybody also participate. And you don't always need to be in the room. You actually remove some meetings because, you know, if you're needed in there, somebody will tag you in, and you can see sort of the comments and questions that are left for you. And you're able to manage that as opposed to, I need to have meetings with everybody all the time. So I think companies that have figured that out, especially if you're working across time zones. So we don't have, in my current setup, sort of, we span like 4 hours for the most part. Like the farthest East Coast in Canada and the farthest West Coast in Canada is 4 hours difference. So it's still manageable. We don't
Mm.
necessarily have European employees, but we do have, nobody's left out in that world because you do have the sort of that continuation of that documentation.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some crazy like AI stuff now where, notes can be taken automatically, and like I said, if it's only 4 hours difference, then it's not like you've really got to do extra work to make sure that you're there for everybody. I wanted to actually ask in terms of like your current CFO role, and I know this applies for many CFOs, of course, as well, but I think it's easy to sometimes slip back into doing, more controller work, managing books, chasing invoices, helping the team. I wanted to ask, how is it that you make sure that you're 100% efficient in the CFO role and not getting drawn into, other work which isn't making you work 100% effective?
Yeah.
How does that look for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it's not always easy to stay sort of at the high level. But I think it's important that you don't avoid it at all costs. I think there are times where you need to dive in and be able to roll up your sleeves and help your team. What I think makes it possible is actually ensuring that you have the right team and processes in place. So uh, I have a fantastic controller now. That's always been one of my big priorities in any of the roles that I have. This is my third full-time CFO role, and that's been sort of top priority. Like who's in that controllership seat to ensure that a lot of the close processes are handled and managed. They're raising flags when they need to. Somebody who can truly own an audit from end to end to really understand at what point to bring me in. And I've been in the weeds with the teams, and in some instances, in other instances, things are going okay, and you trust them there. So I'd say your team is one of the most critical backstops that you have to make sure that you're spending the time that should be on growing the business efficiently, and understanding where the top priorities are for the business, as opposed to, spending a week of your month in the close with the team on a regular basis.
Mm. So if you've got that, that number two, that controller there that you 100% trust to get the work done, it then removes you needing to kind of step in and go back into that kind of role where you're not 100% efficient. So it comes down to having the right staff in place, basically.
Yeah, the right staff, understanding their processes. I think SOPs are super important. I mean, closing the books at most companies is not the craziest operation. There's just steps that you need to take, and you need to ensure you do those same steps on a regular basis. And as we continue to advance with new technologies, are there other ways that we're ensuring that we're doing things in a streamlined fashion, and focus the team on the right events? But yeah, it's team and process, and you as a CFO need to understand that process, be involved in it at least when you're onboarding and understanding what's happening, because otherwise you can't trust it if you don't really know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's you as a CFO to understand your staff, their roles, and making sure the team is effective so you can remain efficient in, projections, forecasting, making sure that you're doing your role 100%.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think the same goes for I mean, everybody sets up their teams differently. I typically on the finance. So I've run other departments as well. Like right now, I have data, but if you think about the finance function specifically, typically ensuring that controller really is able to run the team and manage the team in a good way, run those processes, and then same thing on the FP&A side, like ensuring you have a strong partner on the FP&A side, because it would also easily be. Uh, a possibility to dive into the model itself on a regular basis, and messing around with all the inputs and the assumptions, and that this day and age, more CFOs I think tend to come from an FP&A background, so it's sometimes easier to fall into that trap. And I think, yeah, it's equally important to make sure that you trust the models that your FP&A team is doing. So similar, understand what the models are, be able to manipulate them yourselves, understand what's happening, that you're like, okay, this is a good model, this is a good team, this is a strong operator. But then that allows you to not like, hey, let me get into the model on a daily basis.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, I'm sure we've all been there, like, in previous years. And, sometimes I'm still guilty of it now where, you want to do 100, you want to do everything yourself. You want to double check everything and get involved. But really, I think to be efficient, like you said, is just let those that do what they're supposed to do be 100% good at it. And if you trust your team, then obviously, it makes it a lot easier for everyone, of course. I wanted to ask another quick question for you. You've had a lot of experience working in different size companies, like you said. I know you've worked, your third CFO role. What's the key differences when you're working with a large versus small business as a CFO? Like, how does it affect your role in terms of your day to day, and how do you make sure that you're successful in each, like as a comparison?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I'd say they each come with their own challenges. So I think it'd be wrong for anybody to sit back and be like, well, it's much easier to run a small business, or it's much easier to run a big. So you could be like, much easier to run a small business because there's not as many things moving around. Or you can say it's much easier to run a large business because you have set processes and they should just run. So what are you actually doing?
Mhm.
The truth of the matter is that they each have their own wide array of complexities. So smaller business, sure, there's oftentimes maybe less things going on, but you'd be surprised at how complex some small businesses can be. And you also have to take into consideration that, yeah, the processes aren't as mature. So you need to make sure that, as your business is changing, your finance and controllership processes are evolving with those. And then it's not a mature state. You're looking to grow at a fast rate, so you're constantly on your toes. Or whether a salesperson is trying to create a new product, what does that mean from revenue recognition? Just you need to investigate that. It's not a set it and forget it type process. You're also likely growing at a faster clip, so just the general quantity of things is rapidly expanding. So again, making sure you have the processes and team to scale with that, and not just throwing more bodies, because you also don't typically have the same resources as a large organization. Um, and then vice versa on the large business, uh, you know, things are also still changing. And just because the business has been around for a while, sometimes you face other challenges, like there's tech debt, you have really old systems that you're running off of. So you end up integrating more manual processes because it's harder to change over an ERP system at a large scale organization. And if you're working with some older technology, it wasn't really ready to keep up with what you're actually doing. So there's those challenges. I'd say the people aspect as well. I think when you're running a very large organization, you typically have a much bigger team. So your time is disproportionately spent making sure the team is solid and understanding what's happening across the business. When you have a smaller business, you're still spending a lot of time with the team, but you're also still spending a lot of time in the details, understanding what's moving that business. So I'd say they have each of those. Some of them, again, you could list them as pros or cons depending on what you like to do. Uh, the one similarity in all of those, in order to be successful, is just creating a strong partnership, not only with your team but cross-functionally, with the rest of the organization. And sort of your number one partner is the CEO. I think if the CEO CFO relationship uh, is not in a strong position, it's it's very challenging to run the business. And by strong position, sort of respect on both sides, you're going to always have healthy debate. But if that healthy debate's not happening, and one person's trying to go too far one direction, and it just creates unnecessary turmoil amongst the teams as well. Because like, well, CFO is saying this, CEO is saying that. Which direction are we supposed to go? I report into the CFO, or I report into the CEO. So how do we manage that? So I think the relationship between the CFO and CEO is super important. And then also CFO across to the other leadership team. So your heads of marketing, your heads of technology, those heads of sales, like those relationships are critical. Large business, there's typically more of those relationships to uphold and maintain. And smaller businesses, you might dive in, with the head of sales and like actually try to work with them and figure out what the strategy is for their enterprise sales pitches that they're making. So there's no one size fits all. When I've been at large, the first business I was CFO as was a large business, but we were small from a bureaucracy perspective. I was not like 10 people removed from the most junior accountant. We only had a few levels. So there was
Right.
still that pulse of what's happening. There are other large multinational, certainly public companies where CFO is very far removed from sort of the entry level accountant or entry level financial analyst. I did not want to I did not want to be in that situation, so I still like being close to all members of the team and understanding what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I think like when you've got that smaller team, it's probably easier to build the relationship straight away because obviously there's less people. You may jump into a larger business, and like you said, there might be three heads of marketing, that you've got to build a relationship with and stuff like that. I imagine, I guess the worst nightmare is coming into a business and logging in and seeing Windows 98, which hopefully has never happened, but these kind of things do happen on occasions. So would you say it's your responsibility as a CFO on the smaller side of the business? Would you come in with your own kind of toolkit of processes, software to bring in, if they don't have a Slack, maybe you might bring in a Slack. Do you kind of go in with your own toolkit and set that up, or do you kind of see what the business needs and kind of adapt with them? What's your kind of approach with that?
Yeah, I always when I start a new position, I always come in and assess what's working well for the business because I don't think there's a reason to change just for change sake. If anything,
Right.
it sort of adds extra consternation, other challenges that can come about. Is it really your top priority to move from one tool to the next, or is it about growing the business? But so yeah, I'd say assessing the tools, assessing the team in the first couple of months is very critical. But I don't come with a hey, here are the tools that we're going to use. Like we're 100% using NetSuite. We're gonna implement Tableau. Like we're gonna do this. Like I don't have that playbook. I've used lots of different BI tools. To be honest, I think they're all relatively similar. They have their pros. They each have their pros and cons. I think from a financial tool set, at Prodigy we use NetSuite and then we use Pigment for sort of FP&A side of things. Those work really well. Uh, but I think I get pitched ideas all the time, and there's great tools out there. But you have to take a look at how much better is one tool over the other, and compare that to the time to implementation. What are the advantages that you're getting from doing this? I think just moving off of one platform to another uh, can make you look productive, but at the end of the day, did you really move the business forward? Oftentimes not. So I think you just need to be careful about making those choices.
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair point actually. I think, I've been in a previous business before, and I'm sure everyone else has, where somebody new comes in, changes a software that maybe everybody likes and is already used to, when really it's probably easier for you to just spend the 3 months understanding the ropes, and then focusing on more important things. Unless, of course, that software is disastrous and you really do need to update it. There's probably more important things that you can be doing, of course.
Yeah, if a company has outgrown the tools that they have, because that does happen, like
Mm.
right, you start with one set of tools and your business grows and gets more complex, and it requires a reevaluation because you're not getting the information you need at the right pace. And then of course you need to make a switch, but it's the need based versus my opinion is here are the five tools that every company needs to work with because I think they all have their various trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly that. I wanted to ask, like, whilst we're talking about different tools and things, how is it that you approach building a financial plan for a new year ahead? Like, what's some easy mistakes that you think can be avoided that you've had experience in? And in terms of tools, like, are there any great tools that you are using at the moment? Maybe some you might have already mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think everybody has their own take on this. I've obviously led planning sessions for a number of years now, even before being CFO. It was sort of my roles in the past as sort of leading FP&A teams and such. But I think the biggest mistake people could make, especially first time round, is almost just opening up a spreadsheet and building out what the next year's plan should be without any conversation. So I think the first thing is to actually take a step back, uh, work with the executive team, work with the senior leadership team, uh, understand where the business wants to go. So take a look at what you want to accomplish over the next 12 months, but also how do you have a longer term vision in that 2 to 3 year time. Depending on the business, if it's brand new, like that 3 year might be like next to impossible because you're actually just trying to build out a startup business. But the more mature you get, you can try to understand what seeds do we need to plant to get to where we want to go. So I think first and foremost, understanding what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then you start working with all the teams on a bottom up build. So you need to understand where have you been spending money. With the strategy that you have outlined with the team, is that where you still want to be spending that money? What are the team requirements to accomplish all those goals? So much of it starts without a spreadsheet first and really understanding what you're trying to accomplish. Then you get into all the different inputs that you're going to need and who should be providing each of those inputs, whether it's you need your revenue projections, how many lines of business do you have? Are you looking to start a new line of business? What's your cost of goods sold look like? Operating expense, do you need new heads based on the new plan? Do you feel like there's redundancy in the existing operating expenses, and certain departments or areas are not needed anymore? Are there capital investments that you need to start to contemplate if you start looking at the longer time horizon? And then depending on the stage of your business, like making sure that fits within a cash flow and runway perspective. Like, do you actually have the capital that you need to do everything in that plan? And I always take a look at the budgeting process as it's not a one and done. It's one and done for giving initial guidance and guideposts of what you're working on, but especially in smaller businesses, like the world changes, and we've seen in the last few months the world can change very quickly. So you need to be adaptable as well. So being able to take a look at your plan and understand, okay, the facts have actually changed now. So this initial budget or plan for the year, we need to pivot from that and be open to that, and not just marketing finds a great opportunity and you're like, well, nope, you got to stay within your budget. And like, but flashing lights like, hey, over here, like we have a huge opportunity if we put some more money in, like the ROI is great. And so be willing to open your eyes and see what the other opportunities are.
I mean, I'd love to actually. I'm going to see if I can pick your brains about the budgeting side of things in just a second. You know, when you have different departments screaming for different allocations, but I think it's very difficult to do, isn't it? Because look at the Trump situation with the tariffs right now. Your plan 6 months ago might have been to expand. Now all of a sudden, if you're in a business that's affected by the tariffs, you might have to kind of revisit that straight away, and change different things. I guess a lot of people, and you're of course going to have a lot more experience than I, but I guess some companies want to have growth at all costs, and they're saying, this year we're going to grow by this percentage, we're going to open this new office. For you, how important is it to kind of push back on that and be a bit more realistic? Like, if a sales team are screaming for a new office, how do you, overseas, how do you put them back in line and say, look, this isn't particularly where we need to be right now? Is that just a case, like you said, of getting everyone in a room together and work out what the priorities are before going on to the Excel and hashing it out, basically?
Yeah, it's really understanding, is this where our money is best spent right now? So if you had unlimited budget, sure, do whatever it is that you want to do. But it's still not sound business practice. Like you need to understand, like, what is the focus of the business? Where do we think it's going to grow? And you need to start with some of those convictions and understand, like, does this make sense? And should we be following this track? And then what are some of the stage gates that you have? Depending on your business, you might be able to make decisions earlier on if you get earlier indications. Other businesses have much longer sales cycles, so you actually have to give it some time and air to figure out if it's working. There's some enterprise sales that take well over a year, and so you can't just say, well, we tried this for a month and we didn't get any new business. Like, well, how much we were expecting to get anyways from in that first month. So
Mm.
understanding your life cycle of the opportunities that you're looking at. But you need to understand, yeah, fitting within your budget. Are we trying to grow at all costs? There are times that a business will set that strategy forth, and whether that's, you know, they're a cyclical business and they need to put a lot of chips on the table early on to figure out if it's going to work, or they miss that cycle. It could be a business that is trying to get to market fast because there are other fast follow-ons. So, speed to market is important. So there are many legitimate business reasons why you would have a sort of a growth at any cost setup. And I think from a markets perspective, you've seen some oscillation there where for a long time it was grow at all costs. So you saw a lot of these highly unprofitable businesses getting very large multiples because they were growing really fast. And then that contracted quite a bit, and you needed to show profit over growth. And I think now we're modulating back into a little bit more sanity where it's like, yeah, you should have modest growth with modest profitability, and understand which levers are going to continue to grow both of those lines and know which ones you can pull at what time to move forward. But yeah, there's definitely no one size fits all. I think every business needs to evaluate that with their executive team, with their board, to understand what the top priorities are for the coming year or coming 3 years for that matter.
Yeah, and I suppose that's gonna, like we said earlier, different. That's gonna be very different to a smaller or larger entity as well. On what kind of strategy is going to be suited you. I'd like to ask what your process is, just whilst we're on that topic of, people screaming for allotments of resources for every year. When you're providing those budgets for each department, of course, it's going to be very important to sit down and work out, what the priorities are. But what's your go-to strategy to make sure that you compete with different priorities and make sure that the business strategy is correct, but also that each department is also happy with what they've got for the year ahead?
Yeah, so a lot of it is it starts with the top-down guidance that you've worked on with the executive team, with the leadership team, with the board. Um, and then it's having the teams go back to and work on their plans. And it's not just working on their plans in silos, because oftentimes, you know, product's going to need marketing support, marketing's going to need product support. And so teams need to work together. You need to kind of set some North Stars of like, here is what we're trying to do in this year. Here are the product lines we believe we want to focus on. Uh, what resources do we need to accomplish that? I don't necessarily believe in somebody who had this budget this past year, that's their starting point. I think it's taking a look at actually what do you need to accomplish the goals that we're setting forth. Uh, because you also run into a dangerous scenario. I think this isn't as true anymore, but in the past there were teams that would spend all their money in December, because they're like, well, if I don't spend it this year, I'm going to start with a lower budget because I didn't need all this money this year. It's like,
Right,
well, that
right.
doesn't make any sense. Like maybe you didn't need this year. Um, and I also, again, think through as the year is going on, if you have a set budget and there are different priorities that come up, understanding where certain teams are underspending, and they should be sort of forthcoming with that. Like, hey, we probably don't need this set of money. Is there another part of the organization that can use this? And again, that comes with the communication and understanding, um, that just this year's budget doesn't mean that's the starting point for next year's budget. It's which team needs it right now, and then which team might need it later. So I think, yeah, the prioritization does come a lot to going back to what are your North Stars? What are you trying to accomplish? Which one's going to help you accomplish that more in a faster way or a more certain way? And being able to have those conversations with which each of the leads of the different departments.
Mm. I mean, those are always sometimes going to be different, like difficult conversations. But it's just like we said at the start. If you've got a team that you trust, how great is it that you can have sales director turn around and say, "Hey, look, we don't need this budget for the year ahead. Maybe give it towards IT, maybe towards marketing." You've got I think you've got a great company if those kind of conversations happen anyway. Of course. I did actually want to end on a bit of a quick fire round. Actually, I'd like to ask three quick things. First of all, what's the best book that you've ever read?
It's always a good question because, there's a lot of books that are sort of out there and quoted, and um, I think this one is quoted by many people. So it's probably not one you haven't heard of, but it's been around for a very long time. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book was actually given to me when I was in college having a startup. It was part of an entrepreneur club in the town, and a local entrepreneur like came and talked to us and actually gave the book out to everybody who was in attendance. And it stuck with me a lot. I read it several times, and you know, a lot of it is about how to treat your teams in a respectful way. You're going to get the most from them. There's always something going on with somebody, so learning how to work within your teams is super important. So yeah, I think How to Win Friends and Influence People has been one that has stuck with me for many, many years.
I'll have to agree with you on that one. I've read it a few times myself. It's one you often can easily come back to every year or 2 years just for a quick refresher.
For sure.
I'd like to ask also Excel or Google Sheets and why?
Um, yeah, I think if you asked me this question like 3 years ago, it would 100% be Excel. I think Excel is what I sort of grew up on, and I'd say Excel on a PC because that's the other challenge at times, whether it's a Mac or a PC. But yeah, so I think Excel just for the native use that I grew up with it. But I would say now in this remote environment, especially too, I think Google Sheets has become the number one tool that we all use. It makes it much easier to collaborate within a team. So if you have an FP&A team or a data team or controllership team, they all can collaborate in the same document. You can leave questions for everybody. You can be working on the plan for the year, and you can have certain people working on one sheet versus another, leaving comments. So I think the collaborative nature of Google Sheets has started to win me over. Still think I natively know Excel much better than Google Sheets, but I've warmed up to it.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I think the whole G Suite in general, like, I don't think you can beat it for collaborations and teams and stuff. I think for a lot of people, it's just a bit of a learning curve. CFOs that have used Excel for 10 years, so then introduce Google Sheets. There's different, different sums, different ways to work things out. But I think if you do get it, there's a huge benefit in the end. I wasn't actually going to ask you, but you did mention it. PC or Mac?
Uh, that one I still, so our company, we're all on Mac, so I have morphed to Mac, but I still prefer navigating on a PC versus Mac. So my personal computer is still a PC.
Fair enough, fair enough. And lastly, most underrated skill for a CFO.
Yeah, that's a good question. Everybody's gonna come with probably a slightly different spin on it, but I think the thing that for me that has been successful is having a general manager mindset. So you're not just responsible for the numbers, you're actually responsible for thinking about how that impacts the whole business and how can you work within the teams to get to the best outcome for the overall business. And you have to be thinking holistically about the business, not just what does my spreadsheet say right now, or what am I working on from a controls perspective? Like all that's super important to the job, but in order to be most impactful, I think you have to have a general manager mindset.
100%. Well, thank you so much for your advice today, and thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really do appreciate it. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? If they want to ask any questions, follow up from this show, best way to reach out to you, whether it's email or even LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me, Zach. And sure, if people want to reach out on LinkedIn, that's always a good avenue for sure.
Nice one. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time, and do enjoy the rest of your week.